Hello and welcome to Following On County Cricketer live from Trent Bridge. We're a couple of days out from the first test of the summer, and I was speaking with Sam Cook about an hour or so ago. He's not playing for Essex, he's playing for England. He's set to debut. Exciting times for him. And it was a hugely exciting county championship across Friday to Monday. I'm joined as ever by Steve Harmison, a two-time county championship winner, Nick Friend and George Dobell, who were around the grounds throughout pulsating 4 days of county cricket. We can dip into all the matches that took place across Div 1 and Div 2 that you are watching or joining us here on Following On County Cricketer. Okay, guys, well, I wasn't sure where to start because there were so many ridiculous games. I thought Worcestershire, Essex, and I thought maybe Surrey against Yorkshire. Actually, I didn't really think that. You guys did. But we settled on one of the great games in recent times. A first defeat for Nottinghamshire. Durham winning it with an over left of the day. And really, most people are giving it up as a draw at tea. A seesaw contest, which featured a lot of runs and then a clatter of wickets. How painful a defeat will that be for Nottinghamshire at the end of the season? Only time will tell. Let's start with you, though, Harmy, because that was a big win for Durham.
Yeah, massive win for Durham. To be fair, when you look at the championship from last week to this week, the three teams that were in the top three all got, they all got beat because, all got beat in a way which then now just blows the whole championship up. And that was probably the biggest one, was Notts losing to Durham in a game I'd given up at tea time. And I was amazed when they said Durham had won. 16 overs left when they managed to sort of start batting again. 18 overs left and start batting again. So, three lads got 100. It was a brilliant game. And Ryan Campbell tweeted straight after it, and he was complimenting both sides the way they went about it. And I think that's two very, very. I think George and Nick. I'm sure one of you was at Trent Bridge for the first game in this summer. And that was a fantastic game of cricket as well. Both sides had a go at it. Durham pushed the run rate on and then lost because of, there was a result because of the Durham's run rate to try and set up a game. So, no, fantastic game of cricket. I've got a feel for Hassim Habibi. He got a double hundred and got beat. Carried his bat and got beat. That's heartbreaking for him. But, Robinson back in the runs, which is good. Clark's continuing on. And Emilio Gay, that's another 100, moving from a second division to the first division. So good signs for Durham going forward, great signs for the championship. And you look at the table and you think any one of 5 or 6 teams could possibly win it.
It's not that often that you get a game where you have a double ton, you've got another 4 Centurions, and yet you still get a result. It must have been quite an interesting pitch, wasn't it? Nick, I know you weren't at that game, but I think credit to the groundsperson at Chesterler Street.
Yeah, and credit to Durham's bowlers for finding 20 wickets with, not so much about the pitch, but Durham have gone through, Harmy will know better than me the exact number, but Durham have gone through the more than one cupboard already this season in trying to get a bowling attack out on the field, and more than one overseas player, and they're doing. I actually think a lower key but equally impressive part of that win was James Minto, the 17-year-old left arm quick, getting 70 odd at the top of the innings initially as a night watch for a couple of overs, and then the next day, I remember being told pretty early on, I think on his debut, sorry, that he could bat, but still a serious effort from a kid essentially. But he's playing, I suspect, because I don't know, he might have played this one anyway, I don't know, but I suspect he's involved because they've gone through so many bowlers and they've had their injury issues and they've struggled to find a way of taking 20 wickets amid those injuries. So to win a game like that, where you concede 400 plus first innings, and particularly going to that final session, as Harmy says, I thought it was going to be a draw. The way it ended was the only way that Durham could win, wasn't it? 5 wickets taken the first half of that session. Leave yourself, I think it was 90 odd and 18 overs. It feels like literally the only way that you get a result from that final session from where they started. So, no, seriously good win, and actually quite a significant result for both teams because obviously it ends Notts' unbeaten record. It also means that Surrey, who sort of, I feel like the narrative around Surrey is started quite slowly. They're 3 points behind, they're unbeaten, they're in second. They're probably sort of finding their range quite nicely now. They were very good against Yorkshire. I thought from being at the Oval. Yeah, I don't know. It just feels like we're going to hit this seventh game, and you're very very tight top of the table. You're a very tight um, ninth spot anyway, and then you've got Worcester who won that game against Essex. That I'm sure we'll come to that. That just means that everything in Div 1 is sort of coming back together after a couple of weeks where it looked like the bottom team might be well out of it, and the top team might be running away with it.
I know that they were unfortunate not to beat Warwickshire at Edgbaston, George, but Nottinghamshire's record at home versus what it is away. They've won all 3 games at home, drawn 1. They've played 4 of their 6 at home, and then they've lost and drawn 1 away. They've got another away game coming, I think, against Yorkshire. I mean, is that something to maybe suggest that they're not going to be in the contesting at the top of the table throughout if they can't win away?
I don't think so, to be honest. I think they've still got a really good squad. I think they probably could have done with a bit more pace in the attack this time, but they'll get that back, won't they, when Pennington returns, hopefully. And that might have made a quite big difference. But I think just because they've lost a game or two doesn't mean that their campaign is over in terms of being title contenders. Obviously Surrey are breathing down their necks, but I'm still not sure that the Surrey attack is quite what it was. And I think they might have to do things slightly differently, but we'll see.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure that Surrey's attack is quite where it was. I think they're going to be set for a spell without Lawrence. He's almost certainly not going to play on Friday and maybe out for a little while. They are going to welcome back some players. Dan Worrell, there's been a few whispers about him, but I'm expecting him to play at the weekend. But I do know what you mean, especially with the Kookaburra game still to come. A lack of out-and-out spinner. And, Dan Worrell, he's not in his 20s, is he? There's no Kumar Roach anymore. They've had to rotate a few of the bowlers are coming through. I think Tom Laws is a terrific bowler. I really do. I've felt that way for a couple of years. Fisher looked tired towards the back end of that game, but I think that was a big game for him. But, we could see Sam Curran, Jamie Overton back. So, that's where the riches of depth for Surrey have really come to the fore, isn't it? And, Curtis Patterson as well. That was an important innings coming at a good time. And Ben Folkes, I mean, not for the first time, I've been watching Surrey thinking England had picked the wrong Surrey players. How good has Dominic Sibley and Ben Folkes been? And once again, Folkes weighed in with runs when it matters, as he seems to do more often than not. But yeah, I mean, I know that there's a lot of talk about, we were saying that Surrey beating Yorkshire is the big story. For me, the big story is, as we expected, this is as competitive county championship Division 1 as we've seen in years. If you look at the results up and down the table, with Worcestershire beating Essex and Durham beating Nottinghamshire and Hampshire winning and Somerset, although it looked like they were going to have a bit of a scare as John Simpson, who, by the way, how brilliant has he been for the last year and a half? Looked like they might put pressure back on Somerset when it looked like the game was done. With everybody beating everybody, I think we are set for a real treat.
I'd be a bit worried if I was an Essex supporter, just a bit. Just because without Jordan Cox, without Sam Cook, that squad looks a bit thin. Well, the batting lineup in particular looks a bit thin. So I think they're down to 14 fit players. And the issue the other day was they let Worcestershire score too many runs in the first innings. Tricky wicket. We'll talk about the pitch in a minute because it's going to be an issue. But they let Worcestershire score too many runs, and that would not have happened if Cook had been there. And then they just don't have the batting to compensate. It really isn't any scope for any further injuries. They might get a couple of people back now. Paul Walter and Nick Brown, I guess, will come back fairly soon. But I don't know. I think it's issues at the bottom end of the table that will be more their focus than the top. I mean, it's looking at this stage, isn't it? Like Yorkshire probably in that equation too, Worcestershire clearly, and Essex.
The next game, they play at the Oval. Essex have got they've got to go to the Oval, where Yorkshire and Worcester are, even though they're playing against top sides, they're both at home in the next game, going into the last round again. Essex could find themselves in the bottom two come the end of the first block of championship games.
And Jonny Bairstow heading off for a couple of weeks in Mumbai as well. So that's a big game, that Yorkshire
It
against
is, and that's a
Nottinghamshire.
big decision too. I don't know what people think about that. I mean,
I was
as ever,
wondering.
you probably can't blame a player for taking the IPL money. But
How much would it be? For what is it going to be? 2 weeks?
I'm sure
It's got 5.5 crore, isn't it? Or is it 5.5 lakh? I can't remember.
I don't know how much money it was, but it's no doubt it will be lots of money. And he's but when you take the captaincy,
Yeah.
and it's part of the way through the season, a crucial game, you leave with the club, not in a great spot in the table. Don't know. I'm a big fan of Jonny Bairstow, but I don't think that. Don't know. He is on a central contract as well. I mean,
yeah, I'm not sure the Yorkshire members will be too happy come
Are they ever?
end of Johnny's sort of first block in charge that he goes off and defined it. But I don't blame Johnny for going. Not one bit.
No.
I don't blame him for going.
He's come at the end of his central contract, in the latter stage of his career, he's done with England. Like, you never know. Like, ultimately, looking forward, if he has a really good knockout phase and win by Indians, it's like not beyond the realms of possibility that he gets himself back in the IPL
Next
on
year.
a full deal next year, and he's at the end of his career where he's got to look at those things. Like, it's tricky. Like, I get it. Like, he's Yorkshire's Championship captain. He said all that stuff at the start of the season about how honoured he is, and I'm sure he still is. Like, put it this way, he didn't play at the Oval like somebody suddenly stopped caring about Yorkshire. He was by
it's not
distance.
binary. It's clearly
No,
not.
exactly. And I think I suppose that's the truth of it, isn't it? That it's a shame, and it won't look great to everyone, but it's a short career, and it's particularly short when you're kind of post England and you come at the end of a central contract, and you might be done pretty soon, and then the biggest of all the fish come calling, offering you a gig for a few weeks. So
How long will he in reality likely miss? He's not going to miss that
He's
long.
missing
which is one Champo game
one
and two
Champo
Blast
game,
games, I
yeah.
think it is. So it's not in the grand scheme of things. Would Yorkshire have expected Jonny Bairstow to play 14 Championship games this year? Probably not.
No.
Whether it's broken finger or it's this or that or whatever. Like,
I don't know. Imagine he had said, "Yeah, they came for me, but Yorkshire's my priority right now."
yeah,
It's
and that's
at the
lovely and
start of the
romantic,
season,
but
I think.
that's
I mean, imagine he had done that. I think that would have been rewarded with a lot of respect. But I'm not criticizing him for it. It's a very difficult decision, and a lot of people would do the same thing, I'm sure, and a lot of people have done the same thing. It's just the timing makes you wince a wee bit.
timing is much better than if it happened mid IPL proper 3-4 weeks ago. It's a game. I know what you mean. I just don't think many people would say no.
Did you see that photo of Jonny Bairstow and Jason Roy, who was playing in that game, of
Yes.
course?
Yeah.
Well, it was lovely to be there for it because you'd have got very long odds on those two sharing a county championship field, probably at any point past about 2016, let alone 2025.
I thought it was quite a nice. It was a nice photo, and it just kind of drew a line under their England days in a way. Kind of made it. I mean, I know that neither Jonny nor Jason were going to be playing for England anytime soon, ever again. But just seeing them in that photo just kind of put their England career in the past in a way that I'd not really considered it before, and it made me realise, or just think about, two they're World Cup winners and absolute white ball greats.
I'm so glad to hear you say that, because I don't think Jason Roy in particular is remembered quite as well as he should be by England.
He's my favourite ever England white ball batter by a street. There's no way England win the World Cup in 2019 if Jason Roy doesn't recover from his hamstring injury.
No, that's absolutely right. That's
He played.
And what about
the knock he played against?
They didn't win.
No, literally, the knock he played against Australia in the semi-final. I've always said this is probably without much thought, but I've never seen an England player in any sport played better in a game than his 80-odd against Australia. It got him an Ashes spot.
Yes, it did, didn't it?
He ran at Stark and started punching him through extra cover on the up, 2 balls in a row. And I'm sure they went, well, if that's how he's going to play Mitchell Stark, let's get him to play Mitchell Stark in the summer. And obviously didn't work very well, but I agree with you. I actually, on a slightly more, on a sadder way of looking at it, I kind of looked at it and thought, not just like about the England side of it, but more that you've got Jason Roy and Jonny Bairstow here while PSL and IPL have both been going on, and they're both here, and it kind of did feel a bit like the sort of like watching the aging process of it. And a couple of years ago, Jason Roy was still playing PSL. I mean, I think Roy's decline has been much steeper than Bairstow's, obviously, but it was nice to see Roy out there playing and enjoying it. And he spoke really nicely to Churchy afterwards on BBC Radio, talking about how much he was enjoying it, and that was a lovely thing that actually like that the full you complete the full circle and here are these guys, particularly Roy, say like back playing the championship and for their county in front of what was bloody a crowd on those first couple of days.
Highest crowd this century, wasn't it? For a
14
county
days,
championship
yeah. I thought it was great. I was really yeah, I don't know. I'd kind of forgotten he was still there, I suppose. Certainly in a Red Bull capacity.
I also appreciated the comments. It was probably with that Churchy interview actually, because he was quoted in the Times today.
Yeah.
And he paid a lot of, I know I'm biased when it comes to Gareth Batty, but I don't think he gets anywhere near the credit that he deserves either for what he's done at Surrey. And it was just, I found it refreshing to hear Jason Roy talk about the differences in how Surrey were behind the scenes now as opposed to how they were all those years ago when he last was playing regularly for them. So there was a lot of credit, because both me and Harmy know whenever we see Bats during the off season, he does not stop.
No,
and there is angles and he's flying.
He's always got a plan. The thing I like about Bats,
every player, there's a plan.
And the problem, I think, a lot of Surrey's problem is that when they go away from Surrey, that's when the complications start. I think if there would be, I think from a club point of view, the plans that they make, and then they go away to IPL and they don't come back not the same player, but the same physical condition that they're trying to keep them in. There's a lot of care, a duty of care with Surrey, and a lot of care with Bats. And he goes the extra yard to make sure his players are well looked after, whether they're playing for Surrey or they're going to play in a PSL, IPL or wherever. So, and he does work hard, biased because he's my mate, but he's done a brilliant job at Surrey. And it's easy to say they've got money, but the rotation of players and the international players they've got and ins and outs, to still perform at that level is hats off.
I think we've probably covered off Yorkshire versus Surrey, or Surrey versus Yorkshire. We've talked about the Essex game.
Well, can I just talk a wee bit more about the Worcester thing?
Yeah, I was about to say, because Chris Silverwood was pretty angry at the end of that game, actually, wasn't he?
Yeah, he spoke really well. I mean, he's honest, isn't he? He said
he's another good one.
Well, to be fair, they all are.
Yeah.
If you talk to our county coach, they're going to be very, very passionate, very invested in what they do. I mean, think of Farby or Mickey Arthur. Mickey Arthur makes our enthusiasm.
Mickey's on another level.
He's mad for it, yeah?
He's just on an even more. He's Peter Moore's times Gareth Batty.
Peter Moore's, that's a good example.
Add Paul Farbrace. You get Mickey Arthur, right?
So they're all like that. They have to be, and it's sort of taken for granted. But so look, Worcester, obviously the season hasn't started well. And they've got this issue with the pitch, and it's not intentional, but the pitch is up and down as well as being as well as getting some sideways movement. And they've had 5 days cricket in 2 games. I think the game against Durham lasted 2 days. They were on the wrong side of it. And that pitch was reported by the umpires. And this one was over in 3 days. They were on the right side of it. And they maybe were a bit lucky that it wasn't reported. And the thing is that there's nothing they could do. The ground staff are working really hard. That it's not intentional. But the fact is, it spends several months of winter underwater. And apart from the fact that there's no time to grow any grass, there's then silt that settles on it. And that, in this weather, bakes and cracks. And so the pitch goes up and down. Honestly, you would not want to... facing Harmy on there would be dangerous. And it was okay in this game because you got people like... you got a lot of medium pacers involved, really, or medium fast bowlers. And even then, people were getting wrapped on the gloves. And, the scores were very, very low, apart from Worcestershire's first inning score. So Warwickshire go there this week. And if someone like Shay Simmons plays, it's worth looking out for what could happen, because it's really difficult. Because some of them are scuttling and some of them are rearing, and a lot of them aren't doing anything. But if you're a batter and you've had that already in the same over, good luck, getting forward and smothering any movement.
Some nice stories in that. There was a nice story in that game when Ben Allison bowled his brother Charlie. I thought that was a really nice story. Great family story. Ben was obviously bowling for Worcester against Charlie, who was up in the batting for Essex. But, you look at the Worcester, you look at the scorecards, and George is right, the game was a low-scoring affair. But numbers 9 and 10, I mean, I know Brooks batted 9 in the second innings, but, 43, I think Taylor and Allison, 43 and 40 in the first innings to get that total to 350, which was a mammoth score in the context of the game on that surface. So, but Worcester's bowlers did their job with a ball, but they also did it with a bat to make a score that Essex we're never ever going to get anywhere near. On some of the clips that I've seen on social media, I mean, it did look really, really difficult. Not too much to sort of score runs on, but to really have any sort of timings, and that as a batter, I mean, that knocks all sort of confidence and technical stuff out the window.
One of the issues they might have, Worcester, this is that Matthew Waite, who played such a huge part in that, I think he top scored and then took his career best bowling figures. He was one of the guys who took a real horrid blow to the hand. He's already had a fracture. I mean, I don't know whether he's playing at this stage, but they weren't massively optimistic. So we'll see. That would be a huge loss, because obviously they don't have massive resources.
Games have been abandoned for less. I mean, do you remember that game last year at Bristol that was called off on the first day because a couple of balls bounced a bit? I'm not saying it should have been called off, or that it's good that the Bristol one was, but there's a bit of inconsistency there, I reckon. But
Well, it depends who the bowlers are. As I'm saying, honestly, I reckon if Harmy at his peak is playing in that game, it probably is abandoned, actually. And the thing is that sooner or later those bowlers will come along. And I'm not criticising Worcester here. I just, you see, what you get is people who go to Worcester a lot will generally agree with this. I think nobody wants to move from New Road. It's nobody's first choice option. Yeah.
no, but you're right with you. I mean, the silt,
but it doesn't really work.
The silt is the bit that people understand, isn't it? People think flooding is the problem. It's not. The flooding is inconvenient. The problem at New Road is what the flooding leaves behind. And if it was a case of just sweeping up water, lifting up the plug hole, they would keep on doing that. They'd be irritated, but they do it. It's, as you said, it's the silt and what it does to what the silt does to the actual square left behind is the issue, isn't it? It's not the water itself.
Yeah, and things like the ground stuff, showing me pictures of eye infections they get from working on the place because of the stuff. We all know what's in our river water, yeah? And it's not chlorine. It's not really fit for purpose anymore. And as I say, nobody wants to have to move. But just because we've had a bit of dry weather for a few weeks and they haven't had to go to Kidderminster doesn't actually mean that it's all okay. And sooner or later, it's going to really, really hurt them. If they cannot afford to have games abandoned or, any of these sorts of issues. They've got a real, real problem at that club, which is so amazing, everything they did last year with all the setbacks they had. But anyway, look, they've won one and they've got just an outside chance of staying up, maybe. They're going to have to play out of their skin. But this game against Warwickshire is a big one.
But New Road as well does give them a chance, doesn't it? Because actually, the one problem they're not going to have is they're not going to be doing 3 days in the field, boring, drawing long, boring games. That they are, and this is kind of the reason they went up in the first place in 23. Is they play on a result pitch, which sure there's a bit of luck involved with the toss and stuff, but you got a fighting chance if you've got 7 games at
and a bit like Leicestershire, they bat all the way down. They've got lots of, and I don't mean this pejoratively, but they've got lots of journeyman players in the sense that they know their games. They're good pros. They'll weigh in at every stage. It's not impossible, and it's kind of nice because I think if they got to the 6th, they got 6 games in without a win. All that gap's starting to look big because it's obviously not just the next team, is it? You've got to
Yeah.
get 3 from the bottom. So yeah, they've got a chance now. And as I say, they're going to be really looking forward to this game against Warwickshire, who are looking stuttering a wee bit themselves.
Brilliant stuff. We'll be looking back at that game. It does. I mean, that would just turn the table on its head, wouldn't it? If Worcestershire were to beat Warwickshire next week. Certainly the gap between top and bottom is as close as it probably has been at this stage of the year for a while. We've still got a couple of games to look back on. We're going to do that very shortly. Hampshire beating Warwickshire by 89 runs. There was also a big win for Somerset. We were talking about them in terms of relegation just 3 or 4 weeks ago. They've seen off Sussex. They've had an upturn in fortune in the last couple of weeks, so we'll be talking about that. And we're going to be talking about Leicestershire, who've won 4 games in a row. All of that and more. You're joining us here. 3 games in a row. 3 games, Nick?
3 in a row, 4 out of
3 in a
6.
row. Not quite 4 in a row. That's next week, eh?
3 in a row for the first time since 1998.
Thank you very much. That's why you're doing this
When
job.
they won the championship.
They won the championship.
No, 96 they won the championship.
We'll work it out during the break. This is following on County Cricketer. This is following on County Cricketer. Myself, Jon Norman, Nick Friend, George Dobell and Steve Harmison. We've looked back at a raft of the County Championship fixtures from Division 1. Let's just rattle through the 2 that we didn't discuss. Somerset beating Sussex. That's a welcome upturn in their fortunes. George Dobell, you would have been heartened, I'm sure. You weren't there, were you? You were at
I went
Worcester.
And Edgbaston. I did both.
Lewis Gregory.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, they opened the batting with Josh Davey and Lewis Gregory, and it worked, didn't it? But a really good game again. Very well contested. You expect those might be 2 mid-table sides, I suppose. But interesting that Rue was allowed to play, and he's going to be allowed to play this week as well because he's been released from the England squad. So he'll go on Thursday morning, I presume, but I don't know for sure that Matthew Potts will as well, for what it's worth, because Durham and Somerset are playing in Durham. That's right, isn't it?
Durham, Friday. Yeah, Durham, Somerset, Friday. I like the game. I like what they did. Obviously, I've always got a keen interest in Archie Vaughan, obviously the sort of relationship right with his dad. So it was good the fact that they didn't leave him out. They batted him at number 7. So they're still showing faith that we believe that you are part of this first team outfit. And obviously Gregory opening the baton and Archie repaid them with an 80 because he's bowled a hell of a lot of overs this year. And I still think that's had an effect on what he's done with the bat, opening the baton. About 50 overs in an innings and then go and open the baton as a 19-year-old. That's a big ask. So to see him score runs, fair play to Somerset for that, and fair play for Archie to go and score the runs. And I mean, even Sussex at the end there. I mean, second innings, you were thinking that's it. Game's going to be over very, very quickly here. They were 5 down, and then all of a sudden they put 200 odd on to give them an outside chance of a win. So fair play to the Far East team for fighting the way they fought in that second innings.
John Simpson again
as well. Yeah.
Interestingly, though, sounds like Vaughan was always going to play because they taught, reading Jason Kerr's comments about Josh Davey, said the only way to get Davey in was to have him open the batting. So see, and they wanted Gregory in because he wasn't fit to bowl, but he'd been getting runs. It was an interesting one. I mean, I know they're not inverted commas tail enders. Josh Davey started his career as a batter. Lewis Gregory is very much an all-rounder, isn't he? But it's one of those ones where you look at the scorecard at the start and you wonder whether, whoever's doing the data for whichever company has sort of like stuck the wrong names in or something. Looking at me, what's going on here? But interesting. I was trying to think of other guys who've done it, but and there have been the odd one, haven't there? But not as night watchers, but some people who've been selected to open. But no, it worked. I don't know quite how much it says for the other openers.
Tom Best did it for Yorkshire last two
Tom Best
two
for
years ago to
Yorkshire.
get
Will Beer
the
used to do a
big
bit for
guns in.
Sussex. Um, periodically, you've had guys who've been thrown in mid-game to try and cope with the pitch and that kind of thing. Um, but yeah, I mean, I suppose it's only got to work for 10 overs to say that it's worked, right? So, yeah, I mean, obviously, Gregory wins in the game from there, so hard to argue with it. Interesting to see if they do it again, though, or whether it was very horses for courses to get Davy in as a seamer, or whether that is something else.
It'll be a different challenge next week against Ben Rain, who's very, very good at Durham. Matt Potts, if he's back, Youssef's bowling well. I'm not sure what happens with Youssef, whether he play. Bellingham might be back, so I'm not sure what happens with Durham's overseas. But Cars, and by all accounts, Cars bowled quickly this week on a decent on a flat pitch. He got 32 overs in and bowled quickly this week, 5 wickets in a match. So he'll be, I would imagine, opening it again, because I've got no doubt Bryden Cars will play against India first Test match. But he'll be ready for it'll be a tough test for Somerset next week against Potts and Cars, probably at their trying to prove a point.
Thoughts? You were at Edgbaston.
Yeah, go on then, answer the question.
Oh, I didn't know what the question was, but that game was one of the games fuller. Because Warwickshire were well on top. I don't know what Hampshire were, 200 for 7, roughly. James Fuller comes in, smacks a quick 50, takes them beyond a pass score, and then bowls really well as well. So, but honestly, it felt like that game was, the real decisive moment was when Fuller scored those extra runs in the first innings, and then he bowled well. But Hampshire bat deep, don't they?
Let's move on to Leicestershire then. They won the championship in 1996 and 1998. So there you go. And shout out to the football editor at talkSPORT, Jason Bourne. What a name that is, by the way. Tell me Leicestershire have won 3 games in a row without telling me Leicestershire have won 3 games in a row. Well, suddenly our dear Leicester City supporting football editor is suddenly interested in the county championship and started pointing at the Div 2 table to me when we were at work. But swatting aside Middlesex. Although Kane Williamson's here, isn't he? Does he play the next game, Nick?
No, he doesn't play in the championship until late June. He arrives in time for the start of the blast. I think Middlesex start against Sussex at the end of next week. But no, Leicester are good. They swat aside everyone in just about the same way. They're very efficient with the ball. They dominate the third innings of games. That seems to be an area they've been very strong on. When games have been tight after first innings, they've rolled Middlesex and Gloucestershire in 2 of their last 3 very cheaply in the third innings to basically shift the game in their favour. They're really efficient. Ryan Ahmed's only bowled 47 overs this season. Josh Howell's bowled short spells whenever Peter Hanscom's wanted a wicket. But broadly, he's got these 4 seamers plus Hull, essentially, of Van Beek, the overseas, Ian Holland, Ben Green, who's on loan from Somerset, and Tom Scriven, who played in this game. You get this game most recently against Middlesex, and they basically just wear you down. They bowl. It sounds really obvious to say, but they bowl straight, and they Ian Holland particularly. I think only Kyle Abbott's taken more wickets than him this season. Ben Green's already at a career best season, I think, with the ball in the championship with 21 wickets. They've recruited really smartly. Holland was on loan last year, permanent this year. Green on loan now. Whether he is still available for them once the blast starts, given he's a big player in Somerset's sides, I guess they'll have to wait and see. But even if he's not, they've got a load of options currently sitting out. Ben Mike's not been playing. Liam Draskis hasn't been playing. Chris Wright's hardly played. Chris Wright hasn't played since the first week of the season. And they've got Shah Masood arriving from Pakistan in time for the blast, but then sticking around for the championship. So they then have a decision to make between him and Van Beek, most likely, and suspect they'd go with him for Van Beek, and then Chris Wright would come in for someone to equal up that bowling attack. But they're just efficient. Like they're pretty. Hanscom's pretty ruthless. If you bowl a couple of bad overs, he takes you off. He's got 5 seamers to work with, and none of them have scored a million runs, but they've not really had to. They've won 3 games in a row inside 3 days. They won at Lords for the first time in 45 years. What were the other stats? Because there's a lot going around in the press box on Sunday at Lords, but you don't want to. Alfonso Thomas wasn't particularly keen to entertain the thought, but I kind of said, like, you're 40 points clear.
Mm.
And that's, I don't want to say that's as good as up, but they could not play
That's what
the
I
next
said
two
to Jason
games.
Bourne.
They
I
could
said
not
I
play the
can't,
next two games and
it
still
it's
very,
difficult
very
to
likely be in the top two. So
it's difficult to
um,
make a case for two teams finishing above Leicestershire, I would
it's
say.
I've not been able to do the research on this, but I would be surprised. I would be interested to know when for the last time a team, particularly in Division Two, won four of its first six games. Teams in Div Two just tend, the whole thing is they draw. It's been the league of the
Mm.
draw for a few years, and obviously we've had no rain and stuff like that, which helps. But four wins out of six, and they really genuinely could have won all six as well. Um, it's a serious effort for a team who I think won four games in the last 2 years combined, and we're only going back 10, 11 years to those 2 years when they didn't win at all. So I think Alfonso Thomas is brilliant. He's done a very, very good job. He's a very wise, intelligent young coach. James Taylor similarly alongside him, and I think Claude Henderson, the director of cricket, is very streetwise. When I interviewed him a couple of weeks ago and asked him about the loan stuff, he spoke as well and as sensibly about the loan system as anyone I've heard. He just said, I don't understand why people are so snotty about it. If you've got a bloke not playing first team cricket somewhere else and they're better than what you've got, why wouldn't you bring them in for a couple of games? Doesn't strike me as rocket science. And the two guys they've had on loan the last 2 years, well, three guys in fact, Holland, Scott Curry, who's now back at Hampshire, and Ben Green. I think I'm right in saying between them. So Green's taken 20 odd wickets this year, Holland's taken 30 odd wickets this year, and Curry took 30 odd wickets last year. That's a pretty good return from three guys who don't own at the time of you know of employment, I suppose. So yeah, they're very good, and they Alfonso was right to point out that when they play in the championship next after this week coming, you've got the two Kookaburra games coming up. So there's still stuff that can change, but you look at a side that's about to bring in Shah Masood, they're not getting any weaker. So teams have to play bloody well to finish above them.
I should say George, Nick, and the rest of the cricketers team are dedicated to covering county cricket. I mean, the last 4 or 5 minutes will tell you that in more depth than anyone else.
You're pretty dedicated to covering Leicestershire in the last few weeks.
There we go. With reporters at the ground at every round of fixtures this summer, why not try their award-winning news, features, and insight all on all 18 counties for just £1? You guys could do with a pay rise now by visiting thecricketer.com/digital. Let's just wrap up very, very quickly.
Can
Lancashire.
I just jump in to say we actually don't know what Leicester are playing for. We don't know for sure that there's promotion. It'll be very easy for me to get to some way through the season and say, do you know what? We're going to go to conferences. Well done,
Can
Leicestershire.
you imagine winning Division Two and being told that your reward was being in a smaller Division Two next year?
Smaller Division Two next year. Yeah, that wouldn't
I
be
mean,
fair.
is that likely, George? Can you?
I think it's likely that it won't.
It's absolutely possible. Yeah. I mean, they could look. We know they're going to go to 12 games. Sorry, but they are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, don't we? We know how they'll get fewer games in the Blast by going regional. Yeah. And so they'll say that offsets the one fewer home game because you've got more games against local rivals. Whether it's true or not, you can decide, but that's what they'll say. In terms of how they get to 12 championship games, I still don't know. I don't know.
But I would argue that, bear in mind, we've kind of just become numb to how they got to 14 championship games. It's not perfect now. And for what it's worth, I still think it'll be 10 and 8 next year with 12 games, and we'll just have the same imperfect situation we've got right now.
Yeah, well, it's very possible.
I think that's likelier, but I would agree with George's point that how it doesn't give any more integrity to the competition having 12 games and having 14 games. And neither are ideal. You shouldn't be playing it in a league. Your blue ribbon competition shouldn't be one where you only play half the teams in Division once, and then it's pot luck if you get Surrey twice or Worcestershire twice.
They should do my NFL idea, which I've championed last year. We haven't got enough time to revisit that though.
I like the Champions. I don't mind the Champions League idea of one
no.
18
No.
championship.
No.
You see, all these things could happen, and there still could be a Super September. But
no to that Switzerland idea. I'll explain why in a second. You've joined us here on Following On County Cricketer. This is Following On County Cricketer. Myself, Jon Norman, at Trent Bridge. George Dobell, also at Trent Bridge. Harmy up north. Nick Friend down south. We've got all bases covered. I'll be in Wales at the weekend as well, so maybe I'll do the show from there, just to cover all of England and Wales off. Gloucestershire winning, that was pretty exciting, wasn't it? It they looked like they were in control of the game towards the back end, but it has been quite a while since they've been able to enjoy success, and the crowd that were there certainly sounded like they were doing exactly that.
970 days since the last one at home, which is,
Blimey.
as you say,
They've got a good side.
They're very good.
Side. You got Cameron Green and Bracey. Cameron Green, Price, Cameron Green, Bracey at the top. Ajit Singh Dale will play for the Lions, I think, this summer. And it wouldn't surprise me if he ends up in one of the... I don't think he'll play for England this summer. But it wouldn't surprise me.
He'll be playing for Gloucestershire next summer.
But that's another big question. Have they got the money to keep him? Has one of the Roses teams got a little... a little package for him, because I think they're missing somebody like Ajit Singh Dale, Yorkshire or Lancashire, big county. But that's for another day. I think he will be in one of England's backup bowling units come the summer, possibly against India. But I think he will play in the Lions games that come up. So I think England think a lot of him. And he proved his worth this week. 9 a match, 7 for 110 against a Kent side who started the season very, very well, and you've got to feel for Adam Holyoke. I mean, he started the season very, very well, and he's probably had more bowling injuries than Durham, and Durham have had a hell of a lot. So, and unfortunately for Smokey, he hasn't got the squad that probably Durham have. So, great partnership from Stewart and Benjamin. I think me and Manners were laughing about it. I think it beat the 7th wicket partnership from 1907 or something like that. So, yeah. But now Gloucester look a very, very good side, especially with Cameron Green in.
They played some of the best cricket in the country. They've got no team's got more bonus points in the season, which I think is, not that it doesn't win you anything, but I think it's always a decent gauge for how teams are going. And they've got one more game of Cam Green, which I was quite sceptical about initially, because I don't think any county needs a non-bowling number 5 as an overseas player. Particularly when they don't own a special spinner. But that win against Kent is, in which he made 130 and 67 not out to guide them home the chase, is probably repays that, I suppose. And they've got one more game with him this week, and they're joint 3rd with Glamorgan. So which is mad. It shows how quickly stuff can change. I think only the top 2 remain in the same spot from last week in Div 2. Whereas, we were talking last week about Lancs being dead last. They're off bottom. Should have beaten Derbyshire. Who, and if they had done that, I think as Harmy said last week, they'd have an identical record to them. And Glamorgan, who lost their first 2 and were looking pretty abject, have won their last 2 and are now joint 3rd. Gloucester hadn't won a home game in 3 years, are joint 3rds. Kent, who were top after 2 weeks, haven't won a game since, have lost 3 in a row. Northampton beat Lancs last season to trigger the reaction from Lancs. They got battered by Glamorgan. So I think Div 1's tight. I think Div 2 is even. I think there are 20 odd points between 2nd and 8th at the moment or something. It's a proper dogfight. So and Middlesex, who look pretty well placed to go up. We've done by Leicester in 3 days, and they're now sort of hovering low mid table. So it's I wouldn't have a clue which way to. You wouldn't have a clue about who's going to join Leicester in Division 1 or whichever division it is that they're all in.
Lancashire just fell short. They couldn't take those last 2 Derbyshire wickets. Derbyshire remains 2nd. And Lancashire have got Leicestershire this weekend, so it's not going to get any easier for them. But with Jimmy Anderson back, it's an obvious thing to say. And Tom Hartley bowling. Just the makeup of their attack looked had a lot more quality to it, a lot more threatening, didn't it? Than it has done for quite some time.
It was a slow.
Those pitches are still hurting.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean that look. I mean they really should have won that. You have to win those games, don't you? That will hurt. I think it's a better performance, but has it come to this that they're struggling to win from those positions? But yeah, they've got to look at the wicket. Yeah, in football terms, I'm sure that Mark Chilton and co would be under quite a lot of pressure. But it's amazing how little conversation there is about that stuff. I'm not saying there necessarily should be. But it is amazing. And actually, just going back to something that you said, because there is a serious point there. You know what you were saying about the cricketer covers all the games and stuff, which it does, every round of games. So I've been at several games this season where there's been no written journalist there who wasn't, well, the written reports for the agencies are being written by people who work for the club. That cannot be right.
Right, yeah.
It's not just that you're not going to get a really honest appraisal. You're not going to get any discussion. You're not going to get a view on what happened. I can tell you that I was at a game a few years ago during COVID where there was a pitch invasion. Do you remember? It was at Edgbaston, and there was, I think, it was at Edgbaston, and it was a trial match to see whether they could let spectators come back in. And I was sitting next to Stuart Kane, the chief executive at the time. And I said, "This is the story, Stuart. You know that, don't you?" And he went, "Nah, it's not. It's not. Bless him. It's not the story. Of course it was the bloody story." So I write that as the story. It's not in the agency copy.
It could be worse, you know.
How?
You remember when we were in New Zealand in 2019 at the end of the test match at Hamilton?
Yeah.
And there were no New Zealand press. There was no New Zealand journalists there.
And yet they were very critical about me being critical about the pitch.
Yeah,
And
well,
actually, if it hadn't been for England supporters, there'd have been almost no one at the ground.
yeah.
Because Hamilton's the most boring place in the world to watch cricket. It's a bad wicket.
I think I've seen 3 games there, and all 3 have been absolute stinkers.
Well, doesn't Ross Taylor average? Didn't he average something like 120 there? You might as well, honestly, if you're an opposition,
I think Kane Williamson averages 100
out to bat, you would settle for him getting 120.
Yeah, I think Kane Williamson averages 100 there.
But I just thought it was quite interesting. Those New Zealand journalists were very critical. I mean, I don't know if you remember, they also did a piece about the person who shouted racist stuff out to Archer being English supporter, which is absolutely. And perhaps if there had been any of them there, their opinions might have been a bit more valid.
Mm.
But this is a serious point.
But
genuinely, hand on my heart, if you want to read
George,
impartial, honest cricket journalism,
George, that's what I do.
There's not anyone else there. There's no one else at the grounds.
No, I know. When I want to read about the county championship fixes, I go to the Cricketer because there's no point going anywhere else. I mean, Crick Info might send 1 or 2 across. Yeah, but the streams are on. You can't be watching the streams 8 hours a day.
Well, you can, but people do, I'm sure. But
no,
it's not the same as being there and making judgments.
I honestly don't think they do. I don't think anybody sits there and watches a stream for 8 hours. No, who's got the time to do that?
Well, people who
literally sit there and watch it for 8 hours.
I've done that.
Yeah, you're not right, Nick. You're working the game. I don't think we're not.
I wait up whether to say that or not.
We're not the barometer.
I felt so seen.
Also, I don't think you do. I think what you might do is flick between streams for 8 hours.
The point being,
you've got 15 different, tablets to watch 15 different games.
The reason I mention this now is in connection with talking about Lancashire, is that you don't have the scrutiny that there used to be, which is why maybe some of these things are going a bit under the radar. And also, to some extent, why it's very difficult for us to talk with a great deal of knowledge about lots of different clubs. Because unless you go there and have the conversations, Nick does it brilliantly.
He does.
Unless you have lots of different conversations with lots of different people at lots of different clubs, which is very difficult when you do in England as well. It's difficult to talk with a lot of knowledge, but the local papers which used to do that, they've nearly all gone. And a lot of other people involved are in one way or another working for the club or have an interest in not falling out with the club. So it's quite difficult to get real, honest, impartial journalism, I think.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think this is one of the problems cricket has got, because it needs journalists to essentially spread the message. And I'm not saying that in a PR sense, but if you don't have people at the grounds writing or talking about what is going on, then you have to do it yourself. And as soon as you do it yourself, it completely devalues what's been read and spoken about, in which case people just stop reading and watching it. Because you remember like going back 10, 20 years when the BCCI were kind of blocking Crick Info from accessing grounds, and they took control of all the photographs that were and we kind of looked down at that. But
well, I did, because I did a whole tour from the stands.
I know you did.
I know you did.
Cool, imagine that. We're coming towards the back end of the show. I am here at Trent Bridge, as are you, George. Can we just finish off with just a brief chat about Brendan McCullum and this England side, because I don't know what your overriding thought about that press conference today, but I thought it was quite telling. And the reason I thought it was quite telling was he was quite defensive in a chilled out, entertainer kind of way. Feet on table, cat perched, nonchalantly. But the fact that he twice mentioned the England side that he inherited, as opposed to the England side he now, is a custodian of, and pointed to the improvement in form and results. His talk surrounding Zach Crawley was as expected, less so with Ollie Pope. I thought that him mentioning Jacob Bethel was interesting, and I think Ollie Pope's got a battle on his hands, a real battle on his hands to stay in his starting 11. Shoaib Bashir, I thought was quite interesting as well. And the fact that finally, and we have asked the question, Harmy has been very strong on this actually, who is going to tell Stokes? You've mentioned it as well, George, many times over the last couple of years. Who is man enough to tell Stokes that he needs to stop? And it appears that Stokes himself, whether through his own violation, I don't know, or because Brendan said it to him, but it does appear like that message has actually got through to Stokes that he cannot continue like we saw in New Zealand and on occasion over the last couple of years. He's got to be smarter now.
Maybe. I mean, it's an aside, I expect, but you never really want to change that Ben Stokes character too much. He's a racehorse. You might want to just occasionally pull on a rein here and there, but that fighting determination, that character is what's made him the great cricketer he has been. He looks super fit. He looks thin. Lean, I should say. He looks great.
Mm.
Who knows? But yes, hopefully we don't see him bowling 12-over spells of bouncers. But him doing that has won England numerous tests. And he won a T20 World Cup final pretty much on character. I mean, I think that's the only 50-over T20 international half-century he's made, yeah? And I'm not positive he hit a 4 in it. Maybe there was 1. Anyway, so he's an incredible character, and you wouldn't want it to change completely, You don't want to tame the beast. But you're right. You want a bit more.
But
intelligence.
you want to see him on the field.
You do,
and there's been plenty of occasions where we haven't.
Out his career. If it ends this week, yeah, bloody great career. And it's not all about longevity. 2 World Cups, for God's sake. I'd love to see him go to Australia and do that as well. I think one of the sad parts of his fantastic career will be he probably never did Australia at his peak. But that's an aside.
He's not the only one.
The McCullum presser.
Mm.
It was a bit defensive. It bothers me a bit when he doesn't slag off the previous regime, but he's not very flattering about it in a way that I don't think is thoroughly honest. Because if you say they won 1 in 17, well, let's be honest about the circumstances. COVID, India away, Australia away, bloody tough. He hasn't actually done that stuff. He hasn't been to Australia yet, and he got the same results in India, but actually even heavier losses. So, But I thought was interesting is that he said, and it felt honest to me, that they needed to re-engage with the England supporters a bit, that he felt that maybe, this isn't the word that he used, but they've become a bit aloof from them, and they needed to sort of remind people of their actual humility, because they're not a bad bunch of guys at all. But sometimes they've said things that have come across that have made them look maybe a bit arrogant, maybe a bit dumb even, and they're not. And the key point I think he made was that actually they're international athletes, not international orators.
Yeah, he said we're international athletes, not professional media folk.
Yeah, that's how
which I thought was quite nice. And
yes, it is, and I know what he means because Ben Duckett has said some silly things in press conferences. I think if you were interviewing him one-to-one, you would know what he meant and maybe help him with the words a little bit. Anyway, Ben Duckett is not an arrogant person, and some of the stuff that he said has been willfully misconstrued. The stuff about Bumrah, no one slags Bumrah, for God's sake. He's a world great. But there are times when people have started to talk about them as if they are somewhat aloof, as if they don't care about county cricket, don't look at it. don't pick from those sorts of players. And some of the stuff that they said about, not caring about results. Of course they care. Anyone who thinks they don't care, you're miles out. They care. If anything, they care too much. But they're just going to try and be a bit more thoughtful, I think, is what he said. And I actually think he's right. I think they have lost the public a little bit. I mean, it's not my place to say, but just judging from anecdotal conversations and maybe social media a wee bit, maybe they have a bit. And that is a bit of a shame. And there's no harm that he's recognised that. There's no harm that they've recognised that. And they'll pull it back because there's a lot to like about them. Whether you think they're doing things the right way or not, and I don't entirely, it has been a lot of fun. And they are a nice bunch of fellas trying their best. So there's lots to like and support. And I hope people do get behind them. The next 9 months will define their reputation of this side. We all know that. But there won't be any lack of effort. I promise you of that.
We're going to wrap things up. You're going to be at Trent Bridge for the test match.
Sure.
So will I. Harmy, you will be here. So, Nick, you've got to essentially cover 18 counties. How are you going to do that?
Is that a challenge?
Yep.
I'm going to give me a second to retrieve my schedule.
But it's not just him, of course. There's
No.
who's terrific, and Nick Howson is fantastic.
I'm going to
Yeah.
Surrey v Essex, Hampshire v Sussex, and Worcester v Warwickshire
There
in
we go.
some order.
I might yet
Yeah.
do the last day of Worcester Warwickshire. Who knows?
Yeah.
Doesn't sound
You
like
may well do.
doesn't sound like that goes 4 days, George.
It doesn't, but we've got some weather.
Yeah, we've got
Do it.
some weather coming.
We've
I
got
think
some
we get some
weather.
weather at Trent Bridge as well, haven't we?
Oh,
Yeah, which you wonder about, all this stuff about humility and stuff. Honestly, I wonder if Stokes looks at the forecast and declares it tea on the first day.
Mhm.
Anyway, anything can happen.
anything. Guys, thank you for your time and thanks for joining us on Following On County Cricketer.